one of the things that this can make a huge difference about is just knowing what to be expecting, knowing what to be afraid of. So how many copies of a card like, for example, oh, I don't know, Supreme Verdict on your deck? Well, you can check beforehand and use that to help guide your play.
So Raymond starts off here with looks like Drowned Catacombs, and Andy has a new, I think it's an Orzhov Guildgate.
That it is.
Normally in this matchup, you might think that the control deck was favored with its sweepers, but this Black-White Zombies deck has a lot of resilient threats between the Aristocrat that you see here, Gravecaller, Giralf's Messenger, Sorin, Lingering Souls, so I think this is going to be a pretty good match.
Yeah, I agree. I actually think that the Black-White Zombie deck might have a slight edge. I think the worst card in this deck for it is Orzhov Charm, and it can still use that to some effect. Devour Flesh eats the Cartel Aristocrat.
Yep, and we see Andy gaining a couple life off that, Raymond taking care of that threat, and Andy plays that Giralf's Messenger, dropping Raymond to 18.
The life total is now 22 to 18. Devour Flesh, a card that I think we're going to see having a lot of impact on the standard format as people get used to having a actual Diabolic Edict style effect.
Yeah, it's been a bit since we've had that at instant at that cost, so I think people are going to like this one. Seems like people have been using it a lot this weekend.
And we see Augur of Bolas gives him, I see a Devour Flesh, a Lingering Souls, and a land. He goes with Lingering Souls.
And he'll pick that up, play a land, and pass the turn. And he draws. Looks like he has Restoration Angel in hand, I think I saw, and a couple of lands.
In with the Messenger. Now, previously, Black-White Zombies decks tried to exist, basically splashing for Lingering Souls. And Andy Ferguson does have his 4 copies of Lingering Souls, but on top of that, from the other white cards in his deck, the big adds, if you ask me, are Godless Shrine, #1, the most important card, but Orzhov Guildgate, also important. It makes it very easy for him to play a lot of white spells. Cartel Aristocrat, Restoration Angel, Obzedat, the Ghost Council.
Yeah, he basically picked up 8 dual lands in this new set, so mana looks a lot better. Forbidden Alchemy comes down for Raymond, looking at his options. We didn't see what he took, but he got rid of a couple lands.
And, yeah, I still can't see what he took there. It looked like a black spell, though.
Looks like he's got a Detention Sphere in hand, and I think I saw a Supreme Verdict there also.
End of the turn, another instant, Andy Ferguson with a Restoration Angel, choosing to flicker the zombie. Best friends, almost.
It's a pretty nice combo, dropping Raymond a couple more life with that Enter the Battlefield trigger.
A 5th land, Cavern of Souls. We'll let you know what that is naming as soon as we have an opportunity.
Normally, you would just assume zombie, but he's got these angels,
spirits,
and spirits. So
Advisor, that actually hits several things. It hits, I believe, Cartel Aristocrat and Obzedat.
And comes across for 6.
Knowing your creature types when you have a Cavern of Souls in your deck is very important. For example, Warrior might be a reasonable creature type if you're a red-black aggro deck.
Yeah, most creatures, or not most, but a lot of creatures have sort of a race and a class, and you can choose to go either direction with Cavern of Souls.
Yep. But, you know, if you name things a little too hastily, you can actually end up having it bite you a little bit.
Yep, definitely an interesting card there to use. And
Blood Artist, I love it. Now, Blood Artist, 0/1 Vampire. A lot of people didn't give this card any credit, but what happens is anytime a creature dies, you can drain your opponent for 1. It doesn't matter if it's your creature or their creature.
Yeah, and Andy Ferguson is using that new card, Cartel Aristocrat, that we mentioned, and you saw on turn 2. If he has a Blood Artist, a Cartel Aristocrat, and a Gravecrawler, he can actually have a little engine where he continues to sacrifice that Gravecrawler and recast it to ping his opponent.
Now, one thing that is not in Raymond Perez's deck is Terminus. And so you see Andy Ferguson dropping all of these creatures into play. No fear for Terminus because there are no Terminus. He doesn't have to fear it. This is one of the real benefits of actually having your opponent's deck list that we do in this top 8s. And we do that for the same reason it's been done in a lot of other major events. What we don't want to have happen is somebody who is more well-connected having, their scouts out taking deep, deep notes, and another person whose friends are maybe tired, or maybe they don't have as many people that are there with them to do the heavy work, to have basically a huge burden on them that other players are not going to have. This gives the playing field a level that makes it all about them playing Magic, not about, politicking or other things like that.
Yeah, it just puts everyone on the same foot. So, yeah, and he knows that Raymond only has Supreme Verdict as far as sweepers go, and that Blood Artist is really going to punish Raymond if he does choose to do that. And we'll see what Raymond has. A Detention Sphere, getting rid of that Giralf's Messenger. And then looks like we're going to see a Lingering Souls as well.
Now, Lingering Souls will do a little bit of prevention here, but that Blood Artist does make it less effective than it might otherwise have been.
Yeah, Raymond is going to take one from each of those. Will be drained for one from each of those spirits. So
yeah, it's still worth his while. It just is much worse to lose 2 than to lose 0.
Yep, and we...
Boom.
Wow.
Obzedat, Ghost Council.
And that comes down, drains for some life. That's going to be very hard for Raymond to get off the board.
If you're not familiar with Obzedat is a 5-mana Spirit Advisor. When it comes into play, it drains 2 life from the opponent. And at the end of your turn, you can choose to exile it. And when you do, it will return on your next upkeep and then have haste. And so it kind of keeps away from sorcery speed removal.
And with that ability, really the only options Raymond has for combating it are the one Obzedat of his own, and he's got a lot of sacrifice effects, which Andy can get around pretty well with the rest of his creatures. Unless Andy attacks with that Obzedat, it won't be vulnerable to Azurius Charm, so it's probably going to stick, and Raymond is just at 6 life, so 3 more triggers of it. And
I love the look of Andy's deck. I mean, this just looks awesome. There's a Supreme Verdict. It's going to end up doing a total of 3 life loss to Raymond Perez. And then he flashes back a Lingering Souls.
Yep, and Raymond now dangerously low at 3. What's about to be 1.
Obzedat returns.
Yeah, I like that Andy's deck can play an aggressive role, but also seems very well suited to grinding the game out.
In comes Obzedat. A single spirit jumps in the way of the Ghost Council, and Raymond Perez Jr. in the position to need to gain life or else be dead to the Obzedat's return. Does he have it?
And considering his options?
Okay, I can't fully see his hand, so I don't know if he has it. Well, he's looking.
He has something.
I don't know if that will let him find anything for it, though, unfortunately. And are we going to see a scoop? Oh, is that an Obzedat of his own?
I think that
It will allow him, when he casts it, if he has the mana to cast it, to drain 2 life. Boom! Drains 2 life, brings himself back up to 3 when Andy Ferguson's upkeep happens and Andy's Obzedat returns. Wow, okay. This is pretty interesting. Raymond has the option to remove his Obzedat or exile it if he wants, or he can Legend Rule. So,
yeah, it's we'll see what he chooses to go with there. I think he'll want to get Andy's Obzedat off the board.
Boom, Legend Rule, but it still has the trigger. Both of these Ghost Councils, the struggle for them, they both go to the graveyards, and Andy gets a drain of 2. And there's the final drain right there. On to game 2. But before we go to that sideboarding, one of the things that we do at every single one of these Star City Games events is in the top 8 of all of our events, whether it's the standard event or the legacy event, we give away some prizes. Now, what are the prizes in general? Do you remember, Ben Hayes, what we gave away for the quarterfinals?
Well, in the quarterfinals, we gave away 3 months of premium.
That's right.
And what are we giving away today?
6 months of premium is going to be for our semifinals, and finally in the finals, it's going to be 12 months of premium. And the way you get involved is you come to watch us here, listen to the trivia question that we're going to present, and make sure you give the correct answer with the hashtag SCGPremium. Give that correct answer on Twitter. You can put whatever else you want on it, but you need to have that hashtag SCGPremium. One person who is gives the correct answer and uses that hashtag will be selected from among all of them and be the lucky recipient of 6 free months of Star City Games Premium. So, our trivia question for today. We just saw Cavern of Souls naming advisor. What are the 2 advisors that are in the white-black zombie deck? So, what are the 2 advisors that are in the white-black zombie deck being played by Andy Ferguson here today? So if you know the answer, tweet your answer with the hashtag SCGPremium, and one lucky person will be selected to receive 6 free months of Star City Games Premium, or as Jacob Van Loon likes to say, 2 trimesters. So,
and I'll give you a little hint. You saw both of them cast in that game.
did we? We did.
We did.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So to our sideboard options, I know Raymond Perez Jr., he fell down there pretty hard, getting a ton of really interesting, diverse threats from Andy Ferguson. What do you think he's going to bring in here from his sideboard?
I think we'll see. We may see the ultimate price coming in. He's got Restoration Angels that can hit. It's not great because a lot of Andy's threats are a little more resilient. And as we saw, the Ghost Council is a multicolor creature, so ultimate price won't hit that. We may see Evil Twin.
I like Evil Twin a lot. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, it's got a lot of interactions with Andy's creatures. It's great on a Giralf's Messenger. If it gains Undying, then when it dies, it'll come back and copy something else. It can copy a Restoration Angel, potentially blink one of Raymond's Augurs. So lots of play with that card. We may see Trading Post try to help Raymond get some life, get out of sort of the situation we saw in Game 1. And we could see the 3 Rest in Peace come in too. Andy's deck has a lot of graveyard interactions. So yeah. Raymond's sideboard,
he's got a lot of options.
He has a lot of options, and they all sort of work for different reasons. So it's going to be interesting to see what he brings in. It's hard to say exactly.
I actually really like Blind Obedience here, I believe, because it stops the Obsidian from being able to have its hasty attack from the opponent, and I think that's interesting. And as well as that life gain element from the Blind Obedience, I think is going to be actually relevant. Rest in Peace, I can definitely see Raymond Perez bringing in 1. The question if he brings in all 3, that is certainly a possibility. He's seen his opponent's deck, and as you said, there are a ton of graveyard effects. Giralf's Messenger, Lingering Souls, Orzhov Charm as a possibility to regrow something from the yard, Blood Artist needing the Ghost to Graveyard trigger to happen. But at the same time, those extra Rest in Peace, it's not like Blind Obedience. It doesn't have Extort. So, I mean, extra ones don't do anything for you. So they have a diminishing returns that is pretty huge. Meanwhile, Raymond Perez was just defeated pretty handily Game 1 by Andy. And I think Andy, his sideboard, 2 Appetite for Brains and 4 Thalia seem like a really, really good way to affect the play of a control deck. Thalia, just such a thorn in a control deck side.
Yeah, I think Andy's sideboard is really a nightmare for Raymond. I mean, Raymond's got a 31 spell deck, and I think those 4 Thalia are going to come in and cause a lot of problems for him. Then those Appetite for Brains are going to let Andy pick away any big threats that Raymond could use to go over the top of his creatures. So,
for those of you who are just joining us, I'm Adrian Sullivan here in the booth with Ben Hayes, and we are watching the semifinals of the Star City Games Open Series here in Cincinnati. This is Star City Games Live.
And two players are just shuffling up, getting ready for game two. Just saw Andy take a pretty convincing game one. It was a little dicey there at the end when Raymond drew Obsidian of his own. But Andy's resilient threats and Blood Artist and Giralf's Messenger and his own Obsidian really ended up dealing a lot of just incremental damage and taking Raymond down pretty quickly.
I know that one of the things that Glenn Jones was saying yesterday is that Andy Ferguson's Black-White Zombies deck is very similar to a list that Sam Black talked about earlier this week. But Andy actually made this independently of that discussion that Sam Black had brought up. But what I really like about this list, just when I read off the cards, 4 Giralf's Messenger, 4 Lingering Souls, 4 Diregraph Ghoul, 4 Cartel Aristocrat, 4 Restoration Angel, 2 Obsidian Ghost Council, 4 Gravecrawler. All of those just sound really like a powerhouse full of good cards. And then our support cards, 2 Liliana of the Veil, 2 Blood Artist, 2 Sorin. Those all sound like very reasonable card choices. 4 Orzhov Charm. I've watched it a few times to know that it's at least reasonable. I'm not sure how good it is. It might be great, it might be not good enough, I'm not sure. I think the only thing I don't really like about Andy's deck is I think he's got too many Orzhov Guildgates. And that's a pretty minor criticism to say, you know, hey, I think your mana's quote-unquote too good. And by too good, what I mean is too much attempt to fix your mana at the cost of hurting your ability to cast things.
Yeah, I think you could do with maybe a couple less of those and some more lands that come in and play untapped. We see Raymond leading off with a Godless Shrine tapped here, and Andy with a Gravecrawler getting a quick start. And looks like Raymond does have a Devour Flesh, and I believe I also saw an Orzhov Charm in his hand. So, decent amount of protection. Andy will come in, and Raymond puts it on top of his library with Orzhov Charm.
This is exactly the kind of thing that Raymond wants to do in the early game, is just stem that bleeding, get himself to the higher mana counts in his deck. Is he perhaps a Cartel Aristocrat?
Ooh,
Thalia.
Wow.
Okay, so here's a small mistake that Andy Ferguson made there. He should have cast that Thalia before combat.
Oh, right. If he had done that, then the Azurius Charm wouldn't have been able to be cast.
And the Devour Flesh would take care of the Diregraph Ghoul instead of the Thalia.
Yeah, it's sort of a little error that snowballed a bit, and now we see a couple Diregraph Ghouls coming out, one from his hand, and I believe the one from his graveyard.
And Sorin comes out. This is actually a very, very good opening for Raymond Perez Jr. His ability to make a 1/1 lifelinking vampire. I almost said zombie, but no. It is Andy Ferguson that is the Black-White Zombies deck coming to devour your flesh. Though it is Raymond Perez playing Devour Flesh.
So we see Andy here with a couple of Gravecrawlers facing down this Sorin. And we'll see what he chooses to attack.
I think he went after the life.
Yep, he does seem to have gone after Raymond, so Raymond will take 2 and gain 1 from that vampire.
Sorin, you're Sorin.
Yep, and makes sense why he went for Raymond's life total there. I think I see a trading post in Raymond's hand.
I think you're right.
And we'll see if Raymond chooses to play that. A couple of lands on a trading post, and over on Andy's side, I imagine we'll see that Gravecrawler coming back at some point. And Raymond just considering lots of modes on Trading Post, lots of abilities on Trading Post, I should say. And I think we also see a Tragic Slip in Raymond's hand. Not the best against Gravecrawler, but we'll see if Andy plays any larger threats. The Trading Post, actually, the ability to make the 0/1 goat and block with it, having that 0/1 goat die can turn on Morbid pretty easily, so that Tragic Slip could very easily kill something bigger than 1 toughness.
One thing I've been really appreciating about Raymond Perez and Jr.'s play, a lot of people forget that Trading Post can make goats, and This is a really big deal, actually. Making a little slew of potential blockers can be enough to really take games over. And the Blood Artist makes it a little bit less good because then every goat costs you 2 life, 1 life to make, and 1 life when it dies. But it is a great way to gain life without losing a card. You know, you essentially have yourself a little force field. Force field a card from Alpha/Beta Unlimited, and that's pay 1 life to prevent all damage from a source.
Yep, it functions very similar to that. Tragic Slip comes down taking care of the Blood Artist, and I think I saw a Sorin.
Oh,
in Raymond's
another
hand.
Sorin. Raymond Perez Jr. out of cards now, but he's got some great cards in play.
1 Planeswalker and 1 thing that's kind of like a Planeswalker. And Raymond just hoping that Andy doesn't have too good of a follow-up. We'll see what he comes up with.
Raymond at 20 life here.
Yeah, good position for him with a high life total, that trading post, and that Sorin. So we'll see what Andy can add to the board, if anything. Andy probably thinking about whether he wants to go for Raymond's life total or that Sorin.
Now, were it me, I would go for the thing with only 4 life.
Yeah, and keeping that Sorin low, you know, he's only going to be able to make 1 vampire return. So that Sorin, as long as Raymond doesn't draw anything, will probably go away eventually. The trading post can make another blocker, but that is going to be draining Raymond's life total as well. See a Swamp and that Gravecrawler come back.
You can't stop the zombies.
As long as he's able to keep one of those around, the other one can keep coming back. And Raymond draws his card very quickly. Sorin up to 3, adds another vampire.
I would like to point out, just looking at our top 4 lists, oh my goodness gracious, look at that. A Restoration Angel from the clouds.
Oh, and I believe he drew a Giralf's Messenger, so...
As long as Raymond Perez does not have a one of the many instant removals, for example, Ultimate Price, that Angel is going to take out Sorin.
Yeah, and some of his instant removal won't work on that Angel, like Devour Flesh. So it's very possible that we'll see that Sorin dying this turn. Let's see what Raymond has. Andy, between that Angel and the card he drew, really in pretty good shape again.
I mean, I have to tell you that as an old school Simian grunt caster, that Restoration Angel looks pretty good. I was going to say, though, in our top 4, an interesting little story, I would say, is the story of Boros Reckoner. Right now, only 1 player has Boros Reckoner in their deck at this point, and that is our Naya mid-range player, Eric Rill, who's in the other match. Boros Reckoner otherwise shut out of the rest of the top 8. And in fact, Boros Reckoner continuing its trend of being the losing card.
Yeah, we saw it lose in, I believe, a couple of the top 8 matches yesterday. And we do see that Sorin taken out.
Now, obviously, I'm cheating a little. Oh, my goodness gracious. There is exactly the card you thought you saw. Giralf's Messenger.
And so Raymond now down to 15, facing down, Drown Yards himself, I think?
Yep, he's looking for some flashback cards. It's a shame he would have had a top deck of a Supreme Verdict, but I mean, you can't ever know that. Not Supreme Verdict, pardon me, of Sphinx's Revelation.
And Raymond facing down a lot of damage here. Andy thinking about making a pre-combat play.
Perhaps a Blood Artist? Cartel Aristocrat. In comes the team.
And this looks like an attack for 10 unless we see a block. And Raymond thinking about his blocking options, thinking about his trading post.
Raymond can reduce this to a change of life of 5 if he wants by creating a goat to block the Giralf's Messenger. He drowns himself just to see what little information he can get there. Nothing useful. But yeah, he could theoretically make a goat to block the Giralf's Messenger, a lifelinker to block the Gravecrawler, and then go from there. It looks like instead he's going to gain 4.
Yep, and you know, unfortunately for Raymond in this situation, even a supreme verdict.
Oh,
great
nice,
draw.
nice rip. 3 life.
So what Raymond's really looking to do here is remove that Giralf's messenger in some way and then be able to resolve a supreme verdict. Because if he just has a supreme verdict, the messenger is going to come back, going to drain for 2, and having that zombie in play is going to allow both those grave crawlers to be recast. Looks like he's drawn a blind obedience as well.
Yep. His life very rapidly diminishing here.
So he did have that Sphinx's revelation, but he's going to need a little more than that. And Andy does have 12 power on the board. Raymond's at 12, but he has that trading post and that life-linking vampire still around. And we'll see what Andy chooses to do.
If he blocks the Gravecrawler and uses the trading post, he can be at 6 life at the end of this combat.
Raymond with, I believe, a land and blind obedience in hand, so...
He blocks the Giralf's messenger. This is going to keep him up to 7 life, potentially, if he uses the trading post. Now, I think the Cartel Aristocrat is thinking about sacrificing the Giralf's messenger to prevent the 1 lifelink. And in fact, that's exactly what he's doing.
He is going to do that.
And gain 4 in response. Raymond goes up to 16. And he'll be taking 2, 4, 6, 9, 11, down to 5.
Yeah, very aggressive play. Not knowing what's in Andy's hand, but that Giralf's messenger is essentially insurance against the potential supreme verdict from Raymond. So this is a very aggressive play. We'll see if Raymond can punish him for that.
I mean, he opened the door to it.
And
Andy's kind of wondering how come Raymond's life was so high, and I saw him point to his land in the yard. I'm thinking he's saying, yeah, I use a trading post. That's why I'm not at 1.
Yeah, I think that was the exchange that just happened there. And Andy thinking about possible second main phase plays. And passes the turn. So Raymond with 7 lands, blind obedience, and looks like he drew another land.
Blind obedience.
And passing the turn, he can go up to 9 and block with that vampire to gain another life. I think he will, if Andy doesn't have anything, I think Raymond will be able to survive 1 more turn.
I actually think he's dead, because Andy has already displayed the knowledge about sacrificing the creature being blocked to prevent the life gain.
Yeah, if he does that, that would put Raymond at exactly 0.
Does Raymond have any flashback cards in his yard, like a Think Twice?
I haven't seen. He may have a. He may have that one though. He's drown yarded himself a couple times.
Oh boy.
Oh wow.
Oh boy. And that takes care of that. There's an Orzhov Charm returns the Angel, and the Angel gets cast at end of turn, comes into play tapped, but you know what it's going to do? It's going to flicker this Giralf's Messenger, drain him for 2, reset the Giralf's Messenger, and that has to be it at this point, unless Raymond Perez Jr. has a Christmas miracle in his hand.
Yeah, and we were just talking about Orzhov Charm right before this game. I didn't even really consider the mode of returning your own creature, but Andy using it very well there.
And Andy's like, you're not going to gain life on my watch.
Yeah, this is a lot of damage coming across. Don't think trading post is going to be enough. Raymond goes up to 7 from that trading post.
Back down to 5 after the Giralf's Messenger. Boom!
And there's
and that's
the handshake. So Andy Ferguson.